The grocery store was out of my brand of toothpaste. That's how it started. I stood there in the hygiene aisle, staring at the empty space where my usual tube should have been, feeling irrationally betrayed. Maybe it was a sign, I thought. Maybe the universe was trying to tell me something. Maybe it was saying, Stephen, your life is about to spiral into chaos, and also, your breath is going to smell slightly different while it happens. I grabbed the next best thing, tossed it in my basket, and moved on. I wasn't about to let a minor inconvenience ruin my day. I had more important things to focus on, like remembering what Brenda had told me to pick up because I had, of course, forgotten to make a list. I figured I'd just walk up and down the aisles and let fate decide. Turns out, fate had an interesting sense of humor. As I wandered past the frozen food section, I saw something, or rather, someone, that made me stop in my tracks. A man, mid-40s, dressed too well for a Tuesday afternoon grocery run. Slicked back hair, expensive-looking watch, the kind of shoes that didn't belong anywhere near a linoleum floor sticky from a kid's spilled juice box. And he wasn't just there. He was standing by the end of the aisle, looking around like he was making sure no one was watching him. I know that look. It's the look of someone who doesn't want to be seen, but also kind of does. The look of a guy whose conscience is screaming at him, but his ego is telling it to shut up. And then I saw it. The thing that turned my mildly annoying Tuesday into something much more interesting. Brenda. My wife Brenda. She was there, coming out of the next aisle, carrying a small shopping basket. And she wasn't alone. She walked right up to Mr. Too Fancy for frozen peas, and without hesitation, they leaned in close, too close, and exchanged a whisper and a look that made my stomach drop. Now, I'm not the jealous type. I don't go around suspecting things just because my wife talks to another man. I'm a reasonable guy. I believe in trust. I believe in giving people the benefit of the doubt. But I also believe in my own eyes. And what my eyes were telling me was that my wife had just met some well-dressed stranger in the middle of a grocery store, and whatever was happening between them wasn't about finding the best deal on canned soup. I didn't confront her. That's the thing, I couldn't. Because if you've ever had one of those moments, one of those oh no, my life is taking a turn moments, you know that your brain doesn't react the way you'd expect. It doesn't immediately launch into action. It just stalls, like an old car in the middle of an intersection. So instead of marching over there, I did what any rational, level-headed husband would do. I pretended to be deeply fascinated by a bag of frozen broccoli while I eavesdropped. I didn't catch much, just bits and pieces. This weekend, Brenda said, her voice low but unmistakable. The man, who had the kind of voice that probably sounded great in business meetings where he told people they were being laid off, nodded. We'll figure it out. Just make sure. That's all I got before they both suddenly moved. Brenda turned, walking toward the checkout lanes, and Mr. Fancy casually strolled in the opposite direction like they hadn't just been plotting something right next to the discount meat freezer. I stood there for another full minute, holding my basket, frozen broccoli slowly thawing in my grip, trying to process what I'd just seen. Now, at this point, a reasonable man might have let it go. Might have chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she knew the guy from work. Maybe I was overreacting. But I'm not a reasonable man. I'm a married man. And married men know when something isn't right. So, I did the least reasonable thing I could think of. I followed him. Not in a creepy, I'm about to end up on a security camera way. Just casually. I kept a distance, blending in, pretending to browse the store while watching where he went. And where he went was nowhere. He didn't buy anything. He didn't browse. He just walked straight out the door, got into a sleek black car, of course it was black, and drove off. Which meant one thing. He hadn't been there to shop. I took my time checking out, paying for my random assortment of groceries, including a new brand of toothpaste that I was now starting to blame for all of this, and drove home, where Brenda was already in the kitchen, putting things away like it was any other Tuesday. Hey, she said, giving me a quick glance before going back to organizing the pantry. Hey, I replied, setting my bag on the counter. How was your day? Oh, you know, same old, same old. I looked at her, really looked at her, wondering how many other times she'd come home, kissed me goodnight, and said same old while living some secret second life I didn't know about. I had no proof. Nothing concrete. Just a weird grocery store encounter and a gut feeling that something was off. But gut feelings are rarely wrong. So I smiled. Acted normal. Pretended I hadn't just seen my wife whispering with a man who probably spent more on his haircut than I did on my entire wardrobe. Because if Brenda was playing some kind of game, I wasn't about to let her know I was in on it. Not yet. Brenda had a dentist appointment the next day. That's what she told me, anyway. She mentioned it casually over breakfast, between scrolling on her phone and barely acknowledging my existence. I might be a little late tonight, she said, flipping through emails like she was the CEO of a company instead of a woman who spent half her time complaining about how exhausting it was to pick out a new couch. Dr. Bennett had a cancellation, so I'm squeezing in a cleaning. I nodded, sipping my coffee. Must be nice to have such a flexible dentist. Mine books up 3 months in advance. She didn't catch the sarcasm, or she ignored it. Either way, she just hummed in response and went back to whatever life or death situation was unfolding on her screen. Now, normally, I wouldn't care about a dentist appointment. I'm not the kind of husband who questions every move his wife makes. If she said she had an appointment, then fine. Go get your teeth cleaned, get a free toothbrush, live your best life. But yesterday, my wife had been meeting a man in a grocery store for a conversation that didn't seem to have anything to do with the rising cost of paper towels. And today, she was suddenly squeezing in a dentist visit? I didn't like it. And because I am a man who appreciates facts over paranoia, I did what any logical person in my situation would do. I called Dr. Bennett's office. "Hi, this is Stephen Reynolds," I said, keeping my voice light and friendly, like I wasn't about to become the most annoying husband this receptionist had dealt with all day. "My wife Brenda has an appointment today, and I just wanted to check the time," she told me, but I completely forgot to write it down. A few keyboard clicks later, the receptionist responded, "I'm sorry, but Brenda doesn't have an appointment with us today. In fact, her last visit was 6 months ago, and she's not due for another one until next quarter." Oh, well. I thanked the receptionist, hung up, and sat there at my desk, staring at the phone like it might give me some divine insight into why my wife was lying to me. Now, let's get one thing straight. I'm not a fool. I wasn't about to go full detective, tailing her in my car like some washed-up private investigator in a bad movie. No, that would be too much effort. But I did decide one thing. If Brenda was lying about where she was going, I wanted to know where she actually ended up. So, I did the next best thing. I borrowed my friend Eric's old GPS tracker. Eric had used it when he suspected his teenage son was sneaking out at night. Turns out, the kid wasn't sneaking out at all. He was just sitting in his car around the corner watching YouTube videos so he could have alone time. But the tracker had worked perfectly, and since Eric wasn't currently monitoring any delinquent behavior, I figured it could serve a new purpose. Installing it was easy. Brenda was always in a hurry in the mornings, rushing out the door, convinced that traffic was somehow personally targeting her. I had it under her car in less than 2 minutes. Then I waited. At 3 p.m., Brenda sent me a text. "Brenda, at the dentist now. Love you. What a thoughtful wife. So considerate, keeping me updated while she sat in a waiting room that didn't exist." I didn't respond. I just opened the tracker app and watched the little blinking dot that was supposed to be at the dentist's office. It wasn't. It was moving, heading straight toward downtown. Now, let me clarify something. I wasn't hoping to catch her doing something. I wasn't sitting there rubbing my hands together like some villain, excited to prove my wife was up to no good. I was hoping it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Brenda's little blinking dot parked in a part of the city where nobody goes for dental work. Unless she was getting her teeth cleaned in the back of a pawn shop, she was somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. So, I did something I never do. I left work early. 20 minutes later, I pulled up near the spot where the tracker said she was. It was a street lined with old buildings, some offices, a few restaurants, and a place with a sign that just said LUX. Now, maybe I'm out of touch, but when I see a building with a one-word name in all caps, I assume it's either an overpriced nightclub or the kind of place where rich people gather to pretend they're better than everyone else. I checked the app again. Brenda's car was parked right in front of it. I stayed in my car, watching. 5 minutes later, the door opened, and out she walked. Not alone. With him. Mr. Too Fancy for Frozen Food. They stepped out together, both looking around like two people who really didn't want to be seen. I didn't move. I just sat there, gripping my steering wheel, waiting to see what happened next. They didn't go to her car. No, that would have been too obvious. Instead, they crossed the street and walked into a small coffee shop. I stared at them through the windshield, my pulse pounding. She was laughing. laughing at something he said, touching his arm, leaning in just a little too close. That was it. That was all I needed. Because let me tell you something. When you've been married long enough, you know that laugh. That wasn't a "this is a funny joke" laugh. That was a "this is someone I'm comfortable with, someone I like, someone I've shared secrets with" laugh. And she had never once laughed like that at her actual husband over coffee. I took a deep breath. Now, a man has a few options in a situation like this. Option 1. Storm in there, cause a scene, demand answers. Option 2. Sit back, pretend it's fine, and let it eat me alive. Or option 3. Play the long game. I chose option 3. Because Brenda thought she was in control of this situation. She thought she was the one keeping secrets. She thought she had the upper hand. But that was about to change. There are moments in life where you realize you've been made a fool of, and there are moments where you realize you've been volunteering for it. Sitting in my car, watching my wife have a very friendly coffee with a man who looked like he moisturized twice a day and probably used words like synergy in casual conversation, I realized I was in the latter category. Brenda wasn't even trying to be discreet. They were sitting by the window, for crying out loud. The least she could have done was pick a dark corner, maybe pretend she had some respect for the man she shared a house with. But no, there she was, chatting away, leaning in, nodding at whatever nonsense this guy was saying like he was delivering the Gettysburg Address. I should have been angry. Instead, I felt entertained. Because now, I knew she thought I was stupid. And there's nothing more motivating in life than proving someone wildly wrong. So, I took a picture. Not because I was planning some dramatic reveal, but because I knew future me would want it. And then, instead of confronting her like a guy with no self-control, I left. Because Brenda had already played her hand, and now it was my turn. I went home, made myself a sandwich, and sat down like I was the most relaxed man in America. At exactly 6:42 p.m., Brenda walked through the door. "Hey, babe," she called out, dropping her bag by the entrance like she hadn't just been out living her second life. I glanced up from the TV. "Hey, how was the dentist?" She didn't even blink. "Good. Just a cleaning." The confidence of a liar. The pure, unshakable commitment to nonsense. "Did it hurt?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She walked over to the fridge, pulling out a bottle of water. "A little sensitive, but nothing crazy." Imagine lying about gum sensitivity to your husband's face. I nodded, keeping my eyes on her. "Well, at least you got it out of the way. Teeth feeling nice and fresh." She twisted the cap off the bottle and took a sip. "Yep. Sure they are, Brenda. Sure they are." I let it go, pretending to be satisfied with the performance. Because the thing is, I wasn't playing the same game she was. She thought I was some clueless husband who would never ask questions. She thought she could just say things, and I'd believe them. But what she didn't know was that I had other plans. The next morning, I got up early and left for work before she did. But I didn't go to work. I went to LUX. It wasn't a nightclub. It wasn't even some high-end members-only lounge where rich guys gathered to drink overpriced whiskey. It was a wellness center, which, in normal English, means it was a ridiculously expensive excuse for people to sit in fancy chairs and act like their problems were being solved by scented air. Now, I don't claim to be a genius, but even I knew Brenda wasn't suddenly into holistic healing. So, I walked in, looked around, and did what any sane person in my situation would do. I booked an appointment. "First-time visitor?" the receptionist asked, smiling like this was completely normal. "Yep," I said. "And what brings you to LUX today?" "Oh, so many things." "I heard great things," I lied. "Figured I'd check it out." She nodded, clicking away on her computer. "We have a few options for first-timers. Deep relaxation therapy, guided mindfulness, personalized coaching." "I'll do the coaching," I said, before she could list anything that involved meditation or someone trying to teach me how to breathe. She smiled. "Perfect. You'll be meeting with Peter." Peter, Mr. Too Fancy for Frozen Food, had a name. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in a very modern, very overpriced room, staring at Peter, who was exactly as punchable in person as he was from across the street. "Stephen, right?" he said, giving me the kind of handshake that belonged in a business seminar. "Yep," I said, sitting down. "Nice place you've got here. I didn't even know this existed." He smiled, leaning forward. "We try to keep a certain level of exclusivity." "I bet you do, Peter." "So," he continued, "what made you decide to book a session today?" "Oh, Peter, what a fantastic question." "Well," I said, keeping my face neutral, I'm at a bit of a crossroads in my life. You know how it is, trying to figure out what's really important, which relationships to prioritize, who I can trust. He nodded like he understood. He didn't. I totally get that, he said, folding his hands. A lot of my clients come to me for clarity. Sometimes we don't even realize we're stuck in patterns that no longer serve us. Wow, what a poetic way of saying, I spend my life giving vague advice to rich people. I think that's exactly what I need, I said, staring him right in the eye. Clarity. Something about the way I said it must have thrown him off, because he shifted slightly in his chair. Well, he said, recovering quickly, let's start with your main concerns. What's been on your mind lately? I smiled. My wife. And let me tell you something. Watching his face change was worth every second of this ridiculous experience. He kept it professional, of course. Didn't panic. Didn't break. But I saw it. The flicker of recognition. The brief hesitation. The realization that maybe, just maybe, he should have picked a different career. Your wife, he repeated, nodding. Marriage can be complex. Tell me more. Oh, Peter. I would love to. Peter had the face of a man who suddenly regretted his entire career choice. Oh, he was trying to play it cool. Sitting there, hands folded, pretending this was just another session with another lost soul who needed his deep, profound insights. But I saw it. The shift in his breathing. The way his eyes flickered, just for a second, like a kid caught sneaking cookies before dinner. So, he said, clearing his throat. Your wife? Tell me more about what's on your mind. What was on my mind? Well, Peter, let's see. Maybe the fact that you and my wife were whispering to each other in grocery stores like undercover spies planning a secret mission. Or maybe the fact that she pretended to be at a dentist appointment while she was actually here, in this overpriced temple of self-discovery, doing what, exactly? Or maybe, just maybe, the fact that you and my wife already knew each other, and I was sitting here watching you try to decide whether or not you should pretend otherwise. But I wasn't going to hand him anything. Not yet. I leaned back in my chair. You ever have that feeling when you think you know someone, but then something happens, and you realize maybe you don't? Peter gave me a slow, measured nod. That's a common issue in relationships. Yeah, I said. I figured you'd say that. He shifted in his seat again, just a little. Have you and your wife been together long? 5 years. That's a significant amount of time. Sure is, I agreed. You ever been married, Peter? He hesitated. Just a blink too long. No, I haven't. Huh, I said, nodding. That's interesting. Silence. A good, long, thick silence. And then, because I'm nothing if not generous, I let him have an out. You know, I continued, tilting my head like I was really pondering something. Now that I think about it, my wife actually mentioned she was here yesterday. That was a lie. Brenda had never mentioned LUX in her life. But Peter didn't know that. And that was the fun part. I watched him carefully. His expression barely changed, but there it was, that tiny flicker, the smallest hint of a reaction before he caught himself. Did she? He said smoothly. That's great. We have a lot of wonderful clients who come to us for guidance. Yeah, I mused, scratching my chin. I guess I just didn't expect her to be the type. Peter smiled, like a guy who had just barely avoided stepping in something nasty on the sidewalk. Personal growth can surprise us sometimes. True, I said, staring straight at him. People can be full of surprises. He looked down at his watch. The universal move, for how much longer do I have to endure this? Well, he said, clearing his throat. Let's talk about what you want to get out of this session. Since you're here, maybe we can start with some techniques for better communication in your marriage. That's a great idea, I said, nodding. Tell you what, why don't we role play? I'll be me, and you can be my wife. Peter's face did something amazing. It twitched, just for half a second. That's an interesting approach, he said carefully. I grinned. Come on, Peter. I think it'll be fun. Let's start simple. Say, hey, honey, I had a great day at my wellness center today. Silence. And then, finally, he gave me a tight smile. Stephen, I'm here to help you with. Peter, I interrupted. I'm going to ask you one question, and I want an honest answer. He exhaled slowly, nodding. Of course. Are you sleeping with my wife? There it was. I gave him the trap, put it neatly in front of him like a wrapped gift, and watched to see if he'd step into it. Peter was good. Not great, but good. He didn't panic. He didn't stutter. He just laughed. A soft, knowing chuckle, like I had just told him I thought the moon landing was fake. Stephen, he said, shaking his head. I understand how things can look when emotions are involved, but I promise you, I don't have that kind of relationship with any of my clients. Uh-huh, I said, nodding. That's interesting, Peter. And I stood up. Peter blinked. Are we finished? Oh yeah, I said, stretching. This was incredibly insightful. He frowned slightly, like he knew he had just lost control of something, but couldn't quite put his finger on what. I walked to the door, then paused. You know, Peter, I said, glancing back, you might want to work on your poker face. And I left. Now, here's the thing. I didn't need Peter to confess. Because I already knew the truth. Maybe he wasn't technically sleeping with my wife, but he was something to her. And that was enough. Brenda thought she had a nice little secret. What she didn't realize was that she wasn't the only one keeping one anymore. Brenda had plans that night. At least, that's what she told me. She made it sound very casual, throwing it in between comments about how the dryer wasn't working right and how the neighbors had started some kind of ridiculous home renovation project. I might be out late, she said, sorting through a pile of mail that she'd ignore until it became my problem. Oh yeah, I said, glancing up from my laptop. What's going on? Just catching up with some people. Some people. Now, that was interesting. Not a person, not a friend, just people. The most non-committal, vague description she could possibly give. I could have pushed it. Asked which people. Where. Why she suddenly had a rich and fulfilling social life that required late nights out, when just last month, her idea of a wild evening was falling asleep on the couch with the TV remote in her hand. But I didn't push. Because I wanted her to think she was getting away with it. Sounds fun, I said, stretching. Maybe I should get out too. Do something exciting. She didn't even look up. You? Exciting? Since when? Oh, a beautiful moment. The casual disrespect. The way she didn't even think twice before saying it. I smiled. You're right. I should probably just stay in and wait for you like a loyal golden retriever. That got her attention, just for a second. She glanced at me, but when she saw I was still smiling, she let it go. I watched her the rest of the evening. Nothing obvious. Just little things. How she checked her phone but tilted it away from me. How she disappeared upstairs for a while. Probably to change into something that said, I'm totally a faithful wife who just happens to be glowing with excitement for no reason at all. At 7:15, she grabbed her keys. Don't wait up, she said, heading for the door. Wouldn't dream of it, I said, waving her off. And then, the moment she pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my phone and checked the tracker. She drove across town, past the normal spots where you might reasonably be meeting friends, and stopped in a place that made me actually laugh out loud. A car dealership. Oh, Brenda. I got there 20 minutes later and parked across the street, close enough to watch, but far enough that she wouldn't notice. She was standing outside the showroom with Peter. Because, of course. And what was our dear Peter doing? Holding out a set of car keys. I watched as she took them, laughing, probably at something he said, or maybe just at me, because this whole thing was a joke, right? A man she had no inappropriate relationship with was just casually handing her the keys to a brand new car? I sat there, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, wondering how long she planned to keep this particular secret. Because now, she had a problem. Brenda was not the type of woman who could just show up with a new car and act like nothing happened. She wasn't a surprise, I made a big decision without you kind of person. She was a, we need to discuss every detail of a potential coffee table purchase for 3 months before deciding kind of person. So what was the plan? Was she going to lie and say she bought it? That she suddenly had secret car buying money I didn't know about? Or was she going to pretend it was a loaner, some casual, completely normal gift from a completely normal acquaintance? I didn't move. Didn't storm over there like some dramatic fool. Just watched as they got into their respective cars and drove off. Brenda in her brand new mystery vehicle, Peter in his still too shiny, trying too hard luxury sedan. I waited until she was gone, then pulled into the dealership lot. Inside, a man in a suit. Not Peter, thankfully, because I was not in the mood for another forced conversation, greeted me with the classic, I work on commission and I would love to make you my problem today smile. Looking for something special, he asked. Not exactly, I said, glancing around. Just had a quick question. Of course, he said, eager to help. What can I do for you? I pulled up the picture I had taken and held it out. That woman was just here, I said. With Peter. She left in a new car. His face did exactly what I needed it to do. A slight hesitation. A brief shift in posture. The universal sign for oh no, do I need to lie right now? I gave him a slow, knowing nod. Listen, I'm not here to make trouble, I said, keeping my voice light. I just want to know, who bought the car? His shoulders relaxed just a little. Oh, he said, trying to sound casual. It was a gift. From Peter. A gift, I repeated. He nodded. It happens sometimes. Does it? He coughed awkwardly. Sure. I slipped my phone back into my pocket. Appreciate it. And I walked out. Now, let's just take a moment to fully appreciate this situation. My wife was being handed a brand new car by a man she had no reason to be getting gifts from. And she thought I wouldn't notice. Now, that was fascinating. Because she had options. She could lie, come up with some ridiculous excuse, and hope I didn't ask questions. She could tell a half-truth. Maybe say it was a promotional deal or some nonsense. She could actually confess, tell me the truth, and face whatever fallout came with it. And you know what Brenda picked? Option 4. Say absolutely nothing and hope I never noticed. Because when she got home that night, she parked 3 blocks away and walked. Oh, Brenda. This was getting fun. Brenda did an admirable job of pretending nothing was different. She came home, dropped her bag by the door like usual, and gave me the same effortless performance of a wife who had totally not parked 3 blocks away to hide a car that magically appeared in her life. Hey, she said, kicking off her shoes. You eat yet? Ah, the old classic. Ask an unrelated question. Keep things normal. Act like the universe hasn't shifted in a direction where your marriage is now a bad sitcom plot. Not yet, I said. You? She shook her head, grabbing a bottle of water. I just grabbed a snack earlier. A snack. Right. Because that's what women do when they're out secretly accepting luxury vehicles from their emotional side projects. I leaned back on the couch, studying her. Good night. Yeah, she said, way too casually. Nice to catch up with people. Ah, people. There it was again. I nodded, pretending to accept it. You should have called me. I could have picked you up. A normal wife, one not actively lying about a car she received from another man, would have said, oh, that's sweet, but I was fine. But Brenda? Brenda just froze. For half a second. Not long enough for a normal person to notice. But I wasn't a normal person anymore. I was a man whose wife thought she was smarter than him. So I smiled. Because this was too easy. She forced a casual shrug. Didn't want to bother you. Bother me? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Since when do you worry about that? She laughed, too forced, too aware, and waved me off. It was just easier this way. Oh, Brenda, you should have just told the truth. I let it slide. Let her sit there, scrolling on her phone, pretending she wasn't waiting for me to ask something else. She went to bed early, probably exhausted from the stress of trying to figure out how long she could go before explaining why she had an entire car hidden from her husband. The next morning, I got up first. I left for work. Except I didn't. I drove 3 blocks, parked behind her hidden car, and waited. At exactly 8:10 a.m., Brenda walked out the door, checking over her shoulder like a terrible criminal in a low-budget heist movie. She got in the car, pulled out, and drove away. And I followed. She didn't go to work, didn't run errands, didn't do anything remotely reasonable for someone trying to live a normal life. She went to Peter's house and parked right in his driveway. I sat there, watching, almost impressed at the boldness. There was no hesitation, no sneaking, no fear of being caught. And that was the moment I realized she didn't even respect me enough to be careful. She went inside, and I sat there, tapping my fingers on the steering wheel, wondering how I wanted this to end. Because I wasn't going to do something dramatic. I wasn't going to barge in, throw accusations, demand answers. Because what would be the point? She'd deny it. She'd lie more. And I was done listening to lies. So I pulled out my phone and sent her a text. Me, hey, just checking in. How's your morning? I watched through the window as she pulled her phone out of her bag. I saw the exact moment she read it. And the exact moment she realized she had to lie again. A full minute passed before she responded. Brenda, good. Just running a few errands before work. Errands. At Peter's house. This was actually funny. I texted back. Me. Nice. Need me to grab anything for dinner? Another pause. Probably trying to figure out if I knew anything. Brenda. Nope, all good. See you tonight. I smiled. Because there it was. The final lie. The moment she locked herself in. I put my car in drive, pulled out, and headed straight to a lawyer's office. because Brenda thought she was getting away with something. She thought she had control. What she didn't realize was that while she was sitting in Peter's house, coming up with more elaborate nonsense, I was filing for divorce and making sure she got nothing. Not the house, not my money, and definitely not that car. That night, I came home like everything was normal. We had dinner. We talked, and I didn't say a word. Because tomorrow, when she walked out that door to go see Peter again, she'd come back to a house where the locks were changed and her things were packed. Because that's the thing about playing games, Brenda. You should really know when you're losing. Thanks for watching. Rate the story in the comments. Subscribe to the channel